Hey everyone, Film Loom here. Today we're diving into the mystery/thriller, The Invisible. Get ready for spoilers. The film centers on Nick Powell, a high school senior on the verge of graduation with excellent grades. Following his father's sudden death a few years prior, his mother, Diane, has taken control of their lives, managing both finances and Nick's future. Diane envisions a safe, conventional career for her son, but Nick, a gifted student, harbors a passion for writing and literature. He dreams of attending a prestigious writer's workshop program in London, even willing to skip his graduation ceremony for the opportunity. A scene depicts a large celebration at the Powell residence. Diane delivers a heartfelt speech, acknowledging Nick's academic success. She proposes a toast in his honor and presents him with a personalized gift. However, Nick appears disengaged from the festivities. He leaves the guests, takes a piece of cake, and retreats to the garage. There, he sits by a workbench and suddenly raises a shotgun to his face. This unsettling moment is revealed to be a nightmare, as Nick abruptly awakens in his bed the following morning. He goes downstairs to find his mother in the kitchen. She has prepared a breakfast of eggs and bacon arranged in a smiley face. Diane is reading the newspaper when Nick interrupts, inquiring about her thoughts on the London Writers' Workshop. Diane dismisses the topic, stating that her opinion is already clear. She clearly prefers Nick to stay in America and pursue a more stable career path. After this disappointing start to his day, Nick cycles to school. It is revealed that he earns money by completing homework assignments for his classmates. He discreetly hands over a finished assignment in the school corridor, receiving payment in return. Meanwhile, Nick's best friend, Peter Egan, is being harassed in the boys' bathroom by a group of students led by Annie Newton. Annie is known for her involvement in petty crimes and aggressive behavior. She had recently sold Peter a stolen phone, for which he had paid half the agreed-upon price. Now, she demands the remaining balance, but Peter is penniless. Annie threatens to cut off his finger if he doesn't produce the money soon, leaving Peter terrified and vulnerable. She then exits the bathroom, followed by her gang, leaving Peter in a state of fear and anxiety. This establishes Annie as a dangerous and unpredictable character who will play a significant role in the events to come. The contrast between Nick's academic pursuits and the criminal undercurrents at his school sets the stage for the conflict that will soon engulf him. At lunchtime, Nick confronts Annie's group, offering to pay the remaining balance for the stolen phone. He places a stack of cash on the table, asking if it's sufficient. Annie responds dismissively, telling him to stay out of it. Nick then provokes her by suggesting she is emotionally broken. This insult ignites Annie's anger, and she attempts to attack him. Their altercation is quickly interrupted, and both are taken to the principal's office. The principal questions them about the incident, and Nick jokingly claims that Annie is attracted to him. The principal, unimpressed by his humor, sends Annie home and warns Nick against associating with those he deems to have no future. Annie returns to her chaotic home, a rundown flat shared with her stepmother, father, and younger brother, Victor. Her stepmother is preoccupied with smoking and watching television, neglecting her responsibilities. This infuriates Annie, who scolds her for not feeding Victor. She demands her stepmother get off the couch and stop wasting the day smoking. Her stepmother complains to her husband, seeking his support, but he sides with Annie. An argument erupts between the couple, filled with loud profanities, a scene Annie seems accustomed to. She simply feeds Victor and retreats to her room. Later that night, Peter visits Nick. They discuss an upcoming party hosted by a classmate. Nick reveals he won't be attending, stating he has other plans. He gives Peter a book containing a hidden plane ticket to London, finally revealing his intention to attend the writer's workshop. Peter asks if Mrs. Powell is aware of his plans, to which Nick replies that she is not. He explains that since his father's death, his mother has become overbearing, meticulously planning his life and stifling his own desires. Meanwhile, Annie goes out with her boyfriend, Marcus Bohem, a fellow delinquent. They drive downtown, where Marcus breaks into a luxury car. Annie escalates their criminal activity by smashing a jewelry store window and stealing a necklace. They escape in the stolen car just as the police arrive. The following morning, Annie prepares for school after spending the night with Marcus. He asks her to leave the bag containing the stolen jewelry with him, but she refuses, demonstrating a clear lack of trust. This refusal enrages Marcus. After she leaves, he spitefully calls the authorities, informing them of Annie's crime, setting in motion a chain of events that will have devastating consequences. At school, Annie hides the stolen necklace in her locker. Peter, nearby, inadvertently witnesses this. As he attempts to leave unnoticed, Annie spots him. Shortly after, police arrive at the school and arrest Annie for theft, discovering the necklace in her locker. Annie calls Marcus, who feigns innocence while she insists she knows who betrayed her. At home, Nick's mother informs him that the airline called, revealing his London trip. Nick, panicked, tries to explain, but his mother expresses her disappointment. That night, Peter is on his way to a party when he is confronted by Annie and her gang. Believing Peter is the informant, Annie seeks revenge. Terrified, Peter fabricates a story, claiming Nick, whom he believes is already in London, was the one who alerted the police. The scene shifts to the party, where Nick has decided against going to London. He gives his plane ticket and hotel reservation to another partygoer. Leaving the party, Nick goes for a walk and is followed by a dilapidated car. Annie and her gang are inside, tailing him. When Nick reaches a secluded stretch of road, they emerge from the car and attack him. Peter is a helpless witness from inside the vehicle as his best friend is brutally beaten. Annie approaches the injured Nick, tauntingly asking who is broken now. Nick defiantly retorts that she remains emotionally broken. Enraged, Annie kicks Nick with full force, sending him tumbling off the road, his head striking a rock. One of the gang members checks on Nick and discovers he is barely breathing. The group panics, realizing the gravity of their actions. Annie, momentarily regaining composure, orders her accomplices to carry Nick into the nearby woods. During this frantic process, Nick's watch falls off unnoticed. The group leaves Nick's seemingly lifeless body in the woods, believing they have committed murder. They scatter, each grappling with the horrifying consequences of their actions. Unbeknownst to them, Nick is not dead. He is in a liminal state, an in-between world, where he can observe the events unfolding around him but cannot interact with the physical world. He is essentially invisible, trapped between life and death. His spirit is tethered to his body in the woods, desperately trying to return to the living world. The watch he lost becomes a crucial link to his physical form. This sets the stage for the rest of the film, where Nick, in his invisible state, tries to uncover the truth of what happened and find a way back to life. Unnoticed, Nick's watch falls to the ground as the group abandons his body in a storm drain, covering it before leaving. Annie goes to Marcus's place and confesses to killing Nick, begging for his help in creating a cover story. Marcus, fearing police involvement, tries to dismiss her. Annie retaliates by threatening to expose his past car thefts. She then burns her clothes under a nearby bridge, attempting to erase any evidence. The next morning, a seemingly unharmed Nick emerges from the bushes. He goes to school, attempting to interact with his classmates, but discovers he is invisible and inaudible. No one can see or hear him, even when he tries to create a disturbance. He goes to the principal's office and overhears his mother on the phone. He tries to communicate with her, but she doesn't respond. Confused and frightened, Nick runs home, only to be struck by a car in the street. A large truck then runs over him, yet he remains physically untouched. He realizes no one even noticed the accidents. At home, he sees his mother speaking with the police, reporting him missing. This confirms his worst fear: he is dead, existing in some form of spectral state. Detectives Kate and Brian begin investigating Nick's disappearance. They find tire tracks leading into the nearby woods, along with a broken car side mirror. They are also informed about the earlier altercation between Nick and Annie at school. They visit Annie's home, finding her on the roof. Detective Brian, who has a past connection with Annie's father, asks if she has seen Nick. Annie lies, claiming she hasn't seen him since their argument at school. Brian suspects Annie is hiding something, recognizing her troubled background and the difficult circumstances of her home life. Meanwhile, Nick's invisible presence allows him to observe the investigation and the reactions of those around him. He witnesses his mother's grief and the police's efforts to find him. He also sees Annie's attempts to cover up her crime and Marcus's betrayal. Nick is trapped, unable to communicate or intervene, forced to watch the consequences of the events that led to his current state. His watch, left at the scene of the attack, becomes a focal point for both the police investigation and Nick's connection to the physical world. Detective Brian, sensing Annie's troubled background due to her father's remarriage, decides to give her a break, simply asking her to contact them if she notices anything suspicious. Meanwhile, a search party is organized to look for Nick in the woods. Nick, now accepting his apparent death, is in his room, contemplating his situation. He notices an injured bird on the porch railing. As the bird is about to die, a live, identical bird appears on his shoulder. When the injured bird dies, the live one vanishes, making Nick realize he's not dead but experiencing an out-of-body experience. His spiritual form is tied to his physical body and will cease to exist if his body dies. Detective Brian visits Marcus's garage, questioning him about the jewelry store robbery. Marcus denies any involvement, claiming he was working. Unconvinced, Brian asks Marcus to contact the police if he sees Annie. Later, a nervous Marcus intercepts Peter, telling him the police are looking for him. They return to the woods where Nick was last seen and retrieve his body from the storm drain, moving it to another location. Marcus, believing Annie has become a liability, plans to get rid of her. He arranges a meeting near a train station, claiming he only wants to talk. Unbeknownst to Annie, Peter is also called to the meeting, with police secretly tailing him. All three arrive at the designated spot. Marcus immediately reveals his intentions, pulling a gun on Annie. He orders Peter to remain silent and allows him to leave. However, at that moment, the police arrive. Annie seizes the opportunity, grabbing the gun from Marcus and fleeing. Nick, who has accompanied the police, shouts that they will catch her. To his astonishment, Annie responds with never, indicating she can somehow perceive him despite not seeing him. The next day, Annie, after spending the night in the school gym, goes to Nick's house. She enters his room and looks through his childhood photographs. She begins to understand that Nick's life wasn't so different from hers. They both grew up in broken homes with emotionally distant parents, facing similar struggles. This realization marks a turning point for Annie, suggesting a shift in her perspective and perhaps a glimmer of empathy for the boy she believes she killed. The scene emphasizes the shared pain and underlying vulnerabilities that connect these two seemingly different individuals. The fact that Annie can hear Nick's voice, even partially, introduces a new layer to his spectral existence and becomes a crucial plot element. The weight of Nick's supposed death begins to burden Annie's conscience. When Nick's mother suddenly enters his room, Annie is forced to flee. She rushes to the storm drain where they left Nick's body, only to find it gone. She does, however, discover a nicotine gum pack, leading her to suspect Marcus's involvement. Annie confronts Marcus, dragging him to a ledge at gunpoint. He confesses to moving Nick's body to the foot of a nearby dam, which is scheduled to open in half an hour. As Annie attempts to leave, Marcus shoots her in the stomach. Annie retaliates, shooting him in the shoulder. Despite her serious injury, she manages to call Detective Brian, informing him of Nick's location. The police arrive at the dam and locate Nick just in time, rescuing him from the impending flood. He is rushed to the hospital and admitted to the ICU,